Before going into this video, I want to highlight that I will go into both the unhealthy dynamics that plague many relationships and the healthy foundations of a meaningful relationship. So you have a good understanding of not just what causes relational breakdowns and the patterns of feeling unseen, unheard, and as if no one cares about one, but also how to actually build that relationship you seek. And my insights are born out of both theory and self-analysis of myself and my relationships. So some of it is pretty hard-earned wisdom, so to say. Now when it comes to the video itself, well, in today's digital age, many friendships often exist within the confines of social media platforms, where interactions can feel more like performance than genuine connection. For instance, two friends might frequently engage through likes, comments, and the occasional meme shared in a group chat, but their conversations rarely delve beyond surface-level topics. Like, they would talk about the latest trends or favorite TV shows. And when one friend faces a personal challenge, such as a family issue or job stress, the other may offer a quick, generic text of encouragement like, "You've got this," without probing deeper or offering true support. As a result, while they may appear connected online, the relationship feels more transactional, leaving both friends feeling somewhat isolated despite their frequent interactions. This is because many people maintain a facade. The Jungians would call this the persona, often sharing only superficial or positive aspects of their lives. Vulnerability often being seen as a weakness within this context, leading to guarded interactions, where listening is often passive, with people multitasking or waiting for their turn to speak, leading to shallow exchanges. Emotional check-ins further also might be infrequent or superficial, lacking depth and genuine concern for each other's well-being, where many friendships avoid discussions about imperfections, focusing instead on idealized versions of one another, where friends may further not fully tune into each other's emotional cues, leading to misunderstandings or feelings of neglect. Many friendships thus may lack a truly safe environment for sharing, making it difficult to express vulnerability or difficult emotions. This ties directly into both our modern culture and the influence of social media itself on building connections. Modern culture often promotes individualism, where people are expected to handle their problems alone, leading to feelings of isolation, where many people listen merely to respond rather than to understand, leading to shallow communication that only really stays at the surface of who one is. Yet, deep down, many yearn for something more meaningful, something deeper that touches them and makes them feel truly seen and heard. Now you might think, well, isn't this kind of just what it is? Well, there's something deeper at play here. Because within modern culture, this ties directly into a particular dynamic that is at play. I've coined this the Cassandra-Apollo Dynamic, where the person seeking a relationship that is emotionally fulfilling and feel an actual genuine emotional bond or involvement with someone keeps finding themselves in the experience that it feels forever out of reach. This ties directly into Cassandra's curse, where one's emotional experiences are not seen or validated by those under the influence by the distorted Apollo archetype, leading either to frustration and emotional outbursts as one tries to communicate one's emotional truth, or the shutting down of even articulating this, feeling that it is pointless to reach for something as being heard or seen. The distorted Apollo archetype referring thus to any individual or a culture's pattern that is dedicated to yet bound by order, law, ethics, reason, and intellect that tends to disavow itself of anything emotional or what it thus seems as irrational. So the intellectual specialization of this archetype creating emotional distance, which can be seen as a manifestation of the negative animus within the mother figure, which links to the negative mother complex with her dark wizard animus, meaning that one's mother or father had been emotionally distant or neglectful. So if this has been one's childhood, a person's anima or animus or general emotional nature, to put it in more simple terms, is only familiar with a pattern of relationships that lack emotional reciprocity and consequent dysfunctions through this. This is both something externally in other individuals possible as much as something internalized within oneself, where both Apollo and Cassandra represent two poles of the psychological complex, which is a pattern of thought, behavior, and feeling centered around a particular theme, in this case one relational in nature. As this one Jungian analyst said, such an Apollonic person prefers to assess or judge the situation or the person from a distance based on rules, order, and ethic, not knowing that they must get close up, be vulnerable and empathetic in order to truly know someone else. But if the Cassandra individual wants a deeper, more personal relationship, then there are difficulties. They may become increasingly irrational or emotional to get their emotional truth and reality across. Jung also, for instance, discussed the archetype of the negative animus or negative anima, representing destructive aspects of the unconscious that can exert control over people and groups. In the context of figures that embody this archetype, there is a pretense of care that masks underlying power dynamics where they impose their will to maintain control. Where with this distorted Apollonian archetype, there is a strong emphasis on rationality, control, order, and individualism. Emotional expression and vulnerability, which are seen as chaotic and unpredictable, are often devalued or feared. People who embody or are influenced by this cultural model may feel uncomfortable with emotional complexity both in themselves, in their friends and partners. Vulnerability being associated with weakness in this mindset. And because emotions often lead to vulnerability, people conditioned by this cultural narrative may avoid or reject emotional closeness. So when people who express their emotions or expect emotional reciprocity, these people may interpret it as a threat to the control they are trying to maintain. Further, this distorted Apollonian mindset projects its own repressed traits such as chaos, loss of control, and irrationality onto people who seek deeper emotional connections. So they might then accuse one of being too emotional because they're not in touch with or willing to acknowledge their own emotions, which I see as chaos, loss of control, all these negative labels. And this leads to a false dichotomy where emotional expression is seen as chaos, when in fact it could foster connection and intimacy. This emotional repression can make them seem distant or cold, complicating their ability to connect deeply with others. So if someone grew up in environments where emotional needs were neglected or invalidated, product of Apollonian culture's overemphasis on rationality, which I call hyper-rationality, because rationality isn't wrong. It's just if we overemphasize it and make it hyper-rationality, and we neglect all other aspects of what makes us human, where it gets a little bit problematic. Where what may happen is that they may attract or be attracted to partners with anxious attachment, creating a push-pull dynamic. So these people may seek relationships in a superficial manner, but then distance themselves when emotional intimacy is required, repeating patterns where emotional expression is either feared or rejected. And many people in Apollonian-dominated cultures fear being vulnerable because vulnerability is seen as weakness. However, true emotional connection requires the very qualities they are trained to avoid, namely openness, empathy, and emotional honesty. And this fear of vulnerability manifests in difficulties when dating or building meaningful relationships, as they struggle to meet their partner's emotional needs or to express their own. And this Apollonian persona prioritizes control, material success, and individual achievement, often over emotional or relational fulfillment. So in relationships, this persona might manifest as superficiality, transactional interactions, or focus on external success rather than building emotional depth. Many who are conditioned by this culture might chase status or individual accomplishments, while neglecting the emotional and relational work needed for fulfilling relationships. So people who express emotions are often dismissed or invalidated, much like Cassandra. Though, this happens in childhood as well, between, child and parent within the culture as well. And perpetuates itself because neglect begets more neglect, because everyone prioritizes themselves and go in the whole individual achievement over, creating any safe space for the children to grow up. And this creates a cycle where a person's emotional truth is not acknowledged, leading to frustration, emotional outbursts, or relationship dissatisfaction, where one feels, despite attempts to create a connection or friendship, it leaves one feeling empty, as one does not truly feel seen or heard. And it's not that one is asking for the world either, as one, for instance, wants a friend to really listen and be there, when things get tough, for instance. And the thing is that this dynamic has nothing to do with someone being too emotional or too much. Rather, it stems from a deeper issue, the inability of those influenced by the distorted Apollo archetype to see or validate emotional experiences, both in themselves and others. So when emotional truths are dismissed or ignored, the person trying to express their emotions feels increasingly frustrated and unseen. Over time, as their emotional needs continue to go unacknowledged, and often this tends to create a dynamic where both parties start to adopt this Apollonian mindset, frustration builds until it reaches a breaking point, often resulting in emotional outbursts or a fight. And the issue isn't the level of emotion, I might want to add, but the repeated dismissal of those emotions. This dynamic is also compounded if one neglects one's own inner emotional world, so not listening to one's needs. Because by doing that and not listening to oneself and one's gut and emotions about something, one becomes disconnected from one's own emotional vulnerability and truth. Hence, such a person also more likely invalidates the emotional experiences of others, leading not only to patterns of neglect but also self-neglect. And as this pattern plays out, this dynamic sets up a conflict. The emotional tension builds, and eventually one or both may explode in frustration or anger, not because of an inherent emotional imbalance, but because emotional needs have been neglected for too long. And then you lash out, or you put your partner down, or a friend, or become very, irritated. And this creates a cycle where the true cause of the conflict, emotional neglect and invalidation, is overlooked, and the blame is placed on emotional expression itself, reinforcing the pattern of repression and neglect. This in turn can also lead to a further internalization of this dynamic in the person as well. And often this stems from childhood, which is why one is drawn to such a pattern in the first place, where we don't express our emotions or our needs until it is too late, and we already are frustrated with the other person, and resentment is building, where both end up not expressing their true emotions and needs, thus keeping this dynamic in place. And the only way out is to speak up about one's true emotions and needs when it arises, so don't wait. So this is not just about finding the right person, but cultivating this in ourselves, this awareness. This isn't also where the real foundations for any meaningful relationship comes into play. In our culture dominated by superficial interactions and hyper-rationality, cultivating deep, meaningful friendships can seem like a daunting task. And I want to go now within this part into some of the essential steps to help you build your own meaningful friendships. And I also want to add that any bond is not about just mere shared interests or about a mere conscious decision about staying or not staying. The dynamics are much deeper. As I have already revealed so far with the Cassandra-Apollo Dynamic, and any lasting friendship and even romantic partnership is built on these foundations that I'm gonna go into. But do know that building deeper connections takes time and effort. Now when it comes to the first aspect regarding this foundation, Well, true connection begins with vulnerability, so the Cassandra-Apollo Dynamic is the first internal hurdle to overcome. The fear of vulnerability, and with it, emotional expression, hinders any true, genuine emotional bond to form. It is about sharing one's thoughts, feelings, and experiences openly, and even the difficult ones. And when one allows oneself to be seen in one's entirety, including one's fears and insecurities, you invite others to do the same. And this exchange then fosters trust and deepens the relationship. This is also not something that can be done just like that either. It starts small. Someone can first just share a personal story or a recent challenge and encourage your friend to reciprocate, gradually building towards deeper conversations as comfort grows, as this type of vulnerability is not something that is normally practiced much, due to the Cassandra-Apollo dynamic inherent in the culture, which stifles not only genuine friendships, romantic partnerships, but also social cohesion. Where next, listening is an art that often goes unnoticed. This is about practicing active listening by giving your full attention when your friend speaks, where you can then reflect back what they say to show understanding and ask open-ended questions to encourage deeper exploration of their thoughts and feelings. And they can do the same regarding you. And during conversations, also avoid distractions. Put away your phone, make eye contact, and show genuine interest in what your friend is sharing. Where what is helpful for people who are, dealing with distractions or just being not as present is trying to cultivate presence and mindfulness, which also applies to the next thing too, where when they talk, let them talk without trying to interrupt or, fix their emotions or situation if that is something they talk about. But reflect back what they say without judgment. And if judgment internally arises, know that it can signify something more about oneself than the other, if it's just about mere emotional expression, where a meaningful friendship further thrives on mutual support. So be there for each other during challenging times and celebrate each other's successes, where you can also offer your help without being asked and express your appreciation for the support you receive. You can further also check in with your friend regularly as well. Some simple messages asking how they're doing, because simple messages asking how they're doing can make a significant difference in strengthening your bond. Where instead of only talking about current trends or shared interests only, try to engage also in conversations about identity, values, and personal growth. So create a safe space where you both can explore your evolving selves without fear of judgment. And this acceptance of each other's complexities and flaws fosters an environment of authenticity. And one good tip I have is to share your thoughts on identity and encourage your friend to do the same. Discuss how your experience shape your, view of things and encourage each other to embrace your true selves. Just talk about, how do you feel about something and how do they feel about something, and you talk about that and you're honest about that with each other. Where you also try to stay open-minded about where they are coming from and who they are. We all have our similarities and differences. And certain things, can be coming from, certain trauma they've had or anything else within their life. There's much more, going on than just, a singular thing that they say. So, do keep that in mind. A lot hinges on context, but it doesn't have to only be very serious. Don't underestimate the power of laughter, because humor and playfulness is also very important, as this can lighten difficult moments and strengthen your connection. So finding joy in shared experiences and inside jokes that only you two understand is also something important too. Next to, just planning fun activities together, think ice skating or something, or anything else that you like doing together, whether it's exploring new places, playing games, or engaging in creative projects, for instance. And these moments will then also create lasting memories and deepen your friendship. And also, don't be afraid to be playful and tease each other in a gentle way either, or verbalize your appreciation of each other. Because often one might take a friend for granted, but you have to remember that any friendship is like a gift that is in itself unique, as your friend is the only person like them, as much as all other people are who they are. So, try to appreciate the moments you share, because this can also further strengthen the bond and also lead to increased openness and authenticity between you both. But further, I touched upon this already earlier a little bit, one can make a habit, about checking in with each other emotionally. Reflecting on your feelings, experiences, and growth, as well, your own life away from them. Also allowing then for deeper understanding. And this kind of communication nurtures empathy and connection. So don't be afraid to reach out to each other. And once the bond grows, this becomes more and more natural, where you open up and the other person is there for one. Acknowledging and accepting each other's imperfections is then also crucial for building, a meaningful friendship as well, because that's a part of it too. Because we all have shadows, the parts of ourselves we may not be proud of. But by engaging in shadow work and accepting these aspects, one can also create an environment of understanding and compassion. And it's often these unacknowledged shadows, that can create judgment and tension in a relationship. Where over time, when your bond strengthens and deepens, you both begin to cultivate an intuitive understanding of each other's needs. And this connection allows you to sense when your friend needs support or a listening ear. So, also trust your instincts and be responsive to their emotional cues. Pay attention to nonverbal signals such as body language and also their tone of voice. Because this awareness can help you respond more effectively to your friend's needs. It's also ground yourself within the present moment. Be more within one's body, because that also helps you to be more present and emotionally present as well. Where then openly discussing personal feelings, struggles, and experiences in those moments fosters a deeper connection and allows for healing as well. As a little side note, because healing is relational, especially when it comes to trauma or childhood trauma. And acknowledging emotions in this way can, then lead to a supportive friendship where both parties feel seen and heard, where active listening validates the other person's feelings and reinforces their importance, as validating emotions can strengthen bonds and encourage open communication. And in the deepest sense, building any meaningful relationship is about creating a safe space where both can express difficult emotions without fear of judgment. And this safety is essential for forming lasting friendships, especially for people who may feel vulnerable, where the joy and fun that one has together further deepens the bond as well, leading to a slow reinforcing of the bond, thus creating a bond that can last a lifetime. Not out of some conscious promise or mere agreement, but due to the depth of the emotional bond formed. And such regular, meaningful interactions then allows this friendship to grow. Because the gradual building of trust through shared experiences and open communication, leads to stronger, more resilient relationships. Which in some cases also builds the foundation for a romantic connection as well. Because in romantic relationships, this emotional vulnerability is crucial for building trust, empathy, and a deep bond, going far beyond surface level attraction or compatibility. And this creates a more stable, deeply connected romantic dynamic, where both partners feel safe to be themselves. And when partners focus on meeting each other's deep emotional needs, such as the need to feel understood, valued, and supported, they build a connection that is far more resilient and meaningful than one based on material or logistical concerns. Where, in the end, with all of this, I'm not just, advocating for emotional expression, but for a balance between rationality and emotion, because that is key for any relationship if it is to be meaningful and deep.